The storm had been raging for 3 endless nights. Snow covered everything in sight, turning the alien world into a silent white ocean. Inside a small human shelter, Commander Ethan Ward sat beside a flickering fire. He was tired, cold, and alone, the last human left after the crash of his colony ship. His radio was dead, his supplies were low, and the wind outside howled like a ghost. Ethan had accepted his fate long ago. He spoke to no one, heard no one, only the sound of the storm and the echo of his thoughts. Then, in the middle of that silence, came a sound he could not ignore. A faint knock, soft but real. He froze, his mind trying to decide if it was just the wind. Then it came again, slow, weak, desperate. He opened the door carefully. The wind hit him like knives. And there, standing in the snow, was a woman. Not a human woman. Her skin glowed with a pale violet tone. Her eyes were silver like moonlight, filled with fear and exhaustion. Her white hair whipped through the air as she tried to stay standing. Before he could speak, she collapsed into his arms. Ethan carried her inside quickly, closing the door behind him. She was freezing, her body trembling violently. He wrapped her in a blanket and placed her near the heater. Her skin felt strange, soft yet warm like living crystal. He checked her pulse, slow but steady. For the first time in months, Ethan felt something strange inside him. He felt the need to protect someone again. When she woke, her voice was soft and broken. She spoke in an alien language, a melody of sounds he did not understand. But her eyes spoke louder than her words. They told him she was afraid, alone, and begging for help. Hours passed as he gave her water and small pieces of food. She looked at everything in the shelter with wonder and confusion. Finally, she tried to speak again, slowly this time. "I am Lyra," she said, pointing to herself. Her accent was heavy, but Ethan understood. He nodded. "Lyra," he said quietly, "you're safe here." The way she looked at him then made his heart ache. There was something pure in her eyes, like trust mixed with sadness. She told him, in broken English, that her people were gone, destroyed by the storms and the cold. She had been wandering for days, searching for warmth. He didn't know how much of her story was true, but he could see the pain was real. Days passed, and she began to heal. She watched Ethan repair machines, light fires, and check his drones. Sometimes she helped, clumsy but eager. And every time she smiled, Ethan forgot, just for a moment, that he was on a dying moon. He taught her simple English words, and she learned quickly. She would often point to things and say their names: fire, sky, home. And each time, he nodded, feeling something warm inside him that he hadn't felt in years. But peace never lasts long on an alien world. On the second night, Ethan was woken by strange lights outside. He grabbed his jacket and opened the door. The snow was still falling, but now there were shapes moving in the distance. 3 glowing figures, kneeling in the snow. Their skin the same color as Lyra's, their eyes shimmering like silver moons. Ethan raised his flashlight, heart racing. The figures didn't move closer. They only bowed their heads and spoke in trembling voices. "Please help us," one of them said. Their voices were soft, almost musical, but filled with desperation. Lyra came running to the doorway, her face pale with shock. She looked at them and whispered something in her language. Then she turned to Ethan, her eyes wide with tears. "My sisters," she said, her voice breaking. "They found me." Ethan stood frozen in the doorway. The storm screamed behind them, snow swirling like ghosts in the night. He didn't know what fate had brought these beings to him. But he knew one thing. His lonely outpost was no longer empty. He had given shelter to one lost alien woman. And now, 3 more stood outside, begging for the same mercy. The wind howled louder as he stepped forward. The light from the shelter spilled across the snow. 4 glowing figures stood together in the storm. And above them, unseen behind the clouds, the stars watched in silence. As the story of man and alien began to change forever, Ethan stood at the door, the cold wind cutting through his jacket. The 3 alien women shivered in the snow, their glowing eyes filled with fear and hope. He looked back at Lyra, her face pale and full of emotion. "Let them in," she whispered softly. "They will die out there." He hesitated for a moment, then opened the door wider. The 3 sisters stepped inside slowly, their movements cautious. They looked around the small human shelter like lost children. One of them fell to her knees, exhausted, while the others helped her stand. Ethan closed the door and sealed it against the storm. The heater hummed quietly, the fire cracked, and for a moment, the world felt small again. Lyra knelt beside the weakest one, speaking quickly in her native tongue. The others watched Ethan with wary eyes, not afraid, but uncertain. He could tell they had been through something terrible. Their skin was marked with faint scars, their clothes torn and thin. He handed them blankets and water, and though they didn't understand his words, they understood kindness. Hours passed before anyone spoke again. When the storm outside finally began to fade, Ethan sat near the fire. Lyra sat across from him with her sisters beside her. She looked tired but grateful, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. "My sisters escaped," she said slowly, her English trembling but clear. "From the colony. Not far. Humans came there once." Ethan frowned. "Humans?" She nodded. "Long ago. Before the storm, before you crash here." Her voice cracked as she continued. "They heard us, tested us." The word tested made Ethan's chest tighten. He had heard rumors about illegal research missions before his own ship fell. Maybe some of them had reached this world too. Lyra looked down, her fingers gripping the blanket. "They called us barren," she whispered. "Said we cannot give life, so we are useless." Ethan felt anger rise inside him, not at her, but at what she had suffered. He had seen what desperation could do to people, but this was cruelty. The eldest sister spoke then, her voice soft but steady. "Lyra escaped first," she said. "We followed her light through the storm." Ethan realized the faint purple glow he'd seen outside his shelter was not random. It was them, searching for her, guided by something more than luck. He didn't know what to say. For alien women in his tiny outpost, all survivors of something terrible, he felt the weight of it pressing on his chest. But when Lyra looked at him, he saw trust in her eyes again. "Ethan," she said softly. "You good man, we know." Her words hit him like warmth in the cold. That night, they all sat in silence, the heater buzzing softly. Ethan thought about the colony she mentioned. If other humans had been here, there could be records, supplies, maybe even a transmitter. For the first time in months, he felt purpose again. He decided that when the storm ended, he would go find that place. But as he drifted to sleep, he heard a soft hum outside. It wasn't the wind, it was mechanical. He grabbed his rifle and stepped toward the door. Through the frost-covered window, he saw a faint blue light pulsing in the distance. Not natural, not alien, human technology. He turned to Lyra, who was already standing behind him, her face pale. "They found us," she whispered, her voice shaking. Before he could ask who, the light outside grew brighter. A drone hovered through the blizzard, scanning the snow, searching. Lyra's sisters huddled together, terrified. "They hunt us," she said. "They never stop." Ethan felt a chill deeper than the cold. He realized that by sheltering Lyra, he had stepped into something much bigger. Something dangerous, something that might cost them all their lives. He shut off the lights inside and moved to the control panel. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "If that drone reports back, they'll come." Lyra nodded slowly, her hand trembling as she reached for his arm. "Then we run," she said, her eyes burning with courage and fear. Outside, the storm began to calm. But in the quiet between the wind and the snow, the faint sound of engines echoed across the valley. The hunters were coming. And for the first time in years, Ethan was no longer fighting for himself. He was fighting to protect someone else, someone not human, someone who had trusted him completely. Ethan packed the few things he had left, his hands moving fast. The hum of the search drones grew louder outside, blinking blue lights sweeping across the snow. Lyra and her sisters watched in silence, fear written in their glowing eyes. The youngest one trembled as the sound came closer. Ethan turned to them and whispered, "We have to move, now." He grabbed the old thermal packs and slung his rifle over his shoulder. Lyra helped her sisters wrap themselves in thick coats that looked far too big for them. Their glowing skin shimmered faintly beneath the fabric, giving them away in the dark. Ethan quickly rubbed a handful of dirt and snow over their faces. "It'll hide the light," he said softly, "at least for a little while." They slipped out the back hatch and into the storm. The wind bit through their clothes like icy claws. The snow was deep, their steps heavy, but Ethan knew the terrain better than anyone. He led them through narrow ridges and broken rock until the lights from the shelter faded away. Above them, the sky was dark blue and full of whispering clouds. Only the faint hum of engines followed, like a distant predator tracking its prey. Hours passed as they moved through the wasteland. Ethan could feel exhaustion pulling at his legs, but he pushed on. Every time he looked back, Lyra was there, holding her weakest sister's hand. There was strength in her eyes, quiet, fragile, but fierce. She had lost her world, yet she refused to stop walking. When they reached an old mining tunnel half buried in snow, Ethan motioned them inside. The entrance was narrow, but once inside, they found darkness and silence. He lit a small glow stick, its pale green light reflecting off metal walls. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. The storm howled outside, but inside there was a strange calm. Lyra sat close to Ethan, her voice soft. "You help us again," she said. He shook his head. "No, I just did what anyone should do." She smiled faintly. "No, not anyone, only human." Her words carried warmth that cut through the cold. As they rested, the eldest sister, tall and silent, approached Ethan. "You should not have come with us," she said quietly. "They will not stop until we are gone." Ethan met her gaze. "Then we'll make sure they don't find you." She looked at him for a long time, as if studying his soul. Then she said, "You do not understand, Commander. We are not just refugees." Before he could ask what she meant, Lyra spoke up, her tone soft but serious. "They call us Baron," she said, "but they lie." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Lyra looked down, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "We were created by humans," she whispered, "not born made." The air around them felt colder suddenly. Ethan's mind reeled as her words sank in. "Created, not natural, not alien at all. They made us to test new genes," Lyra said, "mixing human and alien to make stronger kind." Her voice trembled. "But when we could not give life, they wanted to end us." Ethan felt anger and guilt twist inside him. His own species had done this, had played God and thrown them away when they didn't work. He clenched his fists, trying to control the rage. "I'm not like them," he said firmly. "You're alive, and that means you deserve to live." Lyra looked at him, eyes shining with emotion. "You believe that?" "I do," he said, "and I'll prove it." Outside, thunder rolled across the frozen hills. The faint buzz of drones echoed closer again. Ethan turned off the glow stick and whispered, "Stay quiet." He crouched near the tunnel entrance, watching the storm flicker with blue light. The hunters were sweeping the valley again, their machines moving like ghosts. One of the sisters began to cry silently. Lyra reached out and held her close, whispering softly in their language. Ethan watched them, and something inside him shifted. He no longer saw them as strangers or experiments. They were people, scared, tired, and searching for a place to exist. He couldn't let them die, not after what they had been through. As the noise faded again, Ethan took a deep breath. "We move at dawn," he said quietly. "There's an old comm tower to the south. I can try to send a signal there." Lyra nodded, her expression steady. "You think someone will help?" Ethan stared at the snow swirling outside, his voice low. "I don't know," he said, "but we have to try." The night stretched long and cold. But in that dark tunnel, surrounded by what humanity had broken, Ethan realized he had found something that no war, no storm, no experiment could erase. He had found purpose again, and though the sky outside still burned with danger, he knew this story was far from over. Morning came slowly on the frozen moon. The storm had eased, but the wind still whispered through the jagged cliffs. Ethan stepped out of the tunnel first, scanning the white horizon. The sky was a dull silver, and the air shimmered with cold. He turned to Lyra and her sisters. "We move south," he said, his voice low but firm. "There's a comm tower about 20 clicks from here." Lyra nodded, her face pale but determined. Her sisters followed close behind, wrapping themselves tightly in human coats that barely fit. They moved in silence across the snow, their glowing skin hidden under dirt and frost. Each step crunched softly beneath their boots. Ethan led them through a path only he could remember, one that twisted through dead machines and broken steel skeletons left behind by old miners. The sun was weak, barely touching the ground, but even that faint light seemed to make the world shimmer like glass. Ethan stopped once to let them rest, his breath fogging the air. He handed Lyra a small piece of dried food. She took it gently, her hands trembling. "Why you help?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft. Ethan looked at her and smiled faintly. "Because no one helped me when I needed it." Her eyes softened at his words. There was something human in her gaze. Not alien, not foreign, but familiar. Something he had missed for too long. Hours passed before they reached the ridge that overlooked the old comm station. It stood half buried in ice, a metal tower leaning like a frozen skeleton against the wind. Parts of it still flickered with blue light. The solar panels cracked, but not dead. Ethan felt a surge of hope as he looked at it. "If we can power it up, maybe someone will hear us," he said. They made their way down the slope, careful not to slip on the frozen rocks. When they entered the station, the air inside was colder than outside. Broken monitors lined the walls, their screens coated in frost. Ethan brushed the dust away from an old console. "This should still work," he murmured. "If I can reroute the backup cell." Lyra and her sisters watched as he worked, his hands moving fast. Sparks flashed, wires crackled, and the lights began to flicker. When the signal light turned green, Ethan smiled for the first time in days. "It's alive," he said quietly. He began to transmit a distress call, a short, coded message looping again and again. "Human survivor requesting rescue, coordinates attached." But as the message repeated, the air around them began to hum. Lyra frowned, her silver eyes narrowing. Something wrong. Ethan hesitated, looking at the signal meter. It was receiving a reply, too quickly, too perfectly. "That's impossible," he whispered. "No human outpost should respond this fast." Before he could shut it off, the console sparked violently. Static filled the air, and a distorted voice echoed through the speakers. "Unauthorized biological signatures detected." Lyra's eyes widened. "That voice," she whispered. "It's them." Outside, engines roared through the sky. Shadows moved above the clouds, sleek black drones circling like vultures. Ethan ran to the window and cursed under his breath. "They traced the signal," he said. "We have to move now." The eldest sister grabbed his arm. "No time," she said. "Hide first." They rushed into the maintenance bay, just as the ceiling exploded with fire. A drone descended, glowing blue and humming with deadly light. Ethan aimed his rifle and fired, sparks flying as the bullet hit metal. The drone spun, scanning the room, its voice mechanical and cold. "Subject Lyra, Subject Theta, Subject Mira, return to containment." Lyra screamed, covering her ears. Her sisters huddled together as the drone's light turned red. Ethan fired again, this time hitting its sensor. It crashed to the floor, sparks flying across the ice. Smoke filled the air, the sound of engines growing louder outside. More drones were coming. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her toward the back hatch. "We can't fight them all," he shouted. "We run to the valley." They burst out into the cold again. The sky above burned with blue fire as drones swept the ridge. Behind them, the tower collapsed in a burst of sparks and flame. Ethan and the sisters slid down the icy hill, their breath ragged. Snow and ash fell together, turning the world gray. When they finally stopped at the base of the cliff, Lyra looked back. Her eyes filled with tears. "No more running," she said softly. "They will always find us." Ethan put his hand on her shoulder. "Then we make them stop." She looked at him in silence, the wind whipping through her hair. And for the first time, she didn't look afraid. She looked ready. The fire from the tower burned behind them like a warning star. And somewhere far above, in the endless night sky, something else was listening. Something that had been waiting for a human signal to break the silence of the storm. The world was silent again, but it was not peace. The tower burned behind them, smoke twisting into the frozen wind. Ethan and the sisters hid among the cliffs, waiting for the noise of drones to fade. Lyra sat beside him, her face streaked with frost and ash. Her silver eyes shimmered faintly, reflecting the fire in the distance. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They never stop." Ethan looked at her, his breath heavy. "Then we need to stop them first." She turned toward him, confused. "You fight them?" He nodded slowly. "If I don't, they'll take you back to those labs, and they'll kill you all." He checked his rifle, half frozen, half working. His body was weak from the cold, but his resolve had never been stronger. Lyra reached for his hand, her touch soft but trembling. "Why you care?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. Ethan met her gaze. "Because you're alive, Lyra, and because someone has to care." Her eyes glistened, a small smile forming on her lips. That single look gave him more strength than any weapon could. The sisters gathered around, silent and fearful. The eldest spoke first, her voice low. "There is a place we can go, under the ice, a ruin from before humans came." Ethan frowned. "A ruin?" "Yes," Lyra said. "A place our kind found long ago, full of machines that slept for ages." Ethan thought for a moment. If there were ancient machines buried below, maybe they could use them for power or defense. He nodded. "Take me there." The sisters exchanged glances, then began leading him through the ravine. They walked for hours beneath a dead sun. Finally, they reached a massive crack in the ice, glowing faintly from below. Warm air rose from it. Unnatural warmth in a world of frost. Ethan peered inside and saw faint metallic structures buried deep. They climbed down carefully, the sound of dripping water echoing around them. When they reached the bottom, Ethan's eyes widened. It wasn't a ruin, it was a ship. Buried long ago, older than any human colony, covered in frost and strange symbols. Lyra touched the hull with gentle hands, her skin lighting the carvings with purple light. "This was where we were made," she whispered. "This ship carried the first of us." Ethan walked slowly, his boots crunching on the frozen floor. Inside the ship, he saw broken pods, shattered glass, and tubes filled with strange crystals. Old data panels flickered weakly when he brushed them. He could see faint reflections of human words mixed with alien glyphs. He realized the truth. This place had been a joint experiment. Human scientists had used alien technology to create new life, and Lyra and her sisters were part of that attempt. He turned to her, voice low. "You weren't just made by humans, you were made with them." Lyra nodded sadly. "We are both, not one or the other." Her voice softened. "But they said we were mistakes, because we cannot make children." Ethan shook his head slowly. "They were wrong. Lyra, the ability to care, to feel, that's what makes you alive." The eldest sister activated a panel at the center of the chamber. Blue lights flared, and the ship hummed back to life. Machines stirred, releasing soft waves of heat and sound. Ethan stepped back, stunned by the beauty and terror of it all. "Can we use it?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly. "Maybe. The ship remembers its makers. Maybe it remembers us." But before they could do more, the air crackled. Ethan's communicator buzzed, a weak signal. A human voice came through, harsh and metallic. "Unknown survivor. This is Research Command. Your signal was traced. Surrender the assets immediately." Ethan froze, his stomach tightening. They had found them again, and now they were closing in. Lyra's eyes burned bright as she stepped closer. "No more running," she said firmly. "They made us, but now we choose." Ethan nodded, gripping his rifle. "Then we fight." The ship began to shake as its ancient systems woke fully. Energy pulsed through the walls like veins of light. Outside, the sky filled with the glow of descending drones. Ethan looked at Lyra. The mix of fear and strength in her face mirrored his own. For the first time, human and hybrid stood together as one. The wind howled through the ice, and the hum of the ship grew louder. This was no longer about survival. It was about freedom, theirs and his. Ethan took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. The final battle had begun, and the Baron were about to show the galaxy that they were far from empty. The ship thrummed beneath their feet, a pulse of energy that seemed alive. Ethan stepped carefully, eyes scanning the glowing corridors. Lyra and her sisters followed closely, their hands brushing against the cold metal. Every panel, every tube, every surface hummed with a quiet power. It was old, older than humans, older than any record. And yet, it waited, remembering, watching, ready. Ethan moved to the central console, brushing the frost from the controls. The eldest sister whispered, "The ship knows our DNA. It will obey us." He hesitated. "Obey us? What does that mean?" Lyra's voice was firm. "It was made to protect us, not kill us, if we command it." Ethan's eyes widened. "Protect us from what?" She looked at him, silver eyes glowing. "From them, the ones who created and abandoned us." He understood then. The drones, the human hunters, they were coming for Lyra and her sisters. They wanted to reclaim what they considered failed experiments. He clenched his fists. Then we use the ship, he said, determination hardening his voice. Lyra nodded, stepping beside him, touching the console with both hands. The lights responded immediately, pulsing faster, spreading through the ship like veins of energy. Suddenly, the walls shifted, revealing hidden chambers filled with strange machinery. The pods, once broken, repaired themselves in slow movements. Crystals hummed, spinning in patterns he had never seen before. The ship's AI, ancient and alien, awakened with a soft, melodic tone. "Protect the registered subjects," it said, voice echoing through the metal halls. Lyra's sisters stepped forward, placing their hands on the central console. Ethan felt the air vibrate, the warmth spreading from the ship into the ice around them. Outside, the wind howled like a warning. Drones descended faster than before, scanning for life with unerring precision. Lyra turned to Ethan. "They are close," she said, her voice steady despite fear. He raised his rifle. "Then we don't wait." The ship responded to her DNA, opening vents in the ice floor, releasing pulses of energy. The snow outside stirred violently, creating walls of light and frost. Drones collided with the barrier, sparks flying, engines failing. Some of the machines exploded in blue fire, the others faltered, confused by the ancient defense. Ethan ran down a corridor, leading Lyra and her sisters to the ship's weapon chambers. It was filled with devices that looked alive, glowing rods, crystalline guns, and strange shields. The eldest sister's voice was calm. "Choose what feels right. The ship will adapt." Ethan hesitated only a moment, then grabbed a crystalline weapon, feeling its power hum in his hands. Lyra took another, her hands steady, eyes bright with resolve. Her sisters followed suit, each holding weapons that glowed with the ship's energy. The drones pressed closer, their lights piercing the frozen landscape. Ethan moved to the ship's entrance, raising his weapon. Lyra beside him, the sisters flanking, their glowing eyes reflected in the icy snow. "Ready?" he whispered. "Yes," Lyra replied softly, her voice full of strength. "We fight for ourselves now." Then, the battle began. The drones attacked with speed, but the ship's defenses reacted instantly. Energy pulses shot from vents, freezing the snow around the machines. Crystalline beams cut through metal like knives. Ethan fired at a drone attempting to flank them, its circuits frying instantly. Lyra's sisters aimed together, coordinating like a single unit. Their hybrid energy made the drones falter, the AI of the ship amplifying their power. As they fought, Ethan realized something shocking. The ship was not just a defense system, it was a teacher. It learned their moves, amplified their strengths, and punished their enemies with precision. Lyra's voice echoed in his mind. "It remembers our ancestors, and it protects us like they would have." The thought hit him. They were part of a legacy, a creation not abandoned. They were meant to survive, to grow, to fight. Hours passed. The drones fell one by one, their lights extinguished in the blizzard. When the last one crashed, the snow around them settled, silent once again. Ethan lowered his weapon, breathing hard. Lyra touched his arm gently. "We survived," she said softly. He nodded, watching the glowing sisters around him, feeling a strange pride. They were not just survivors, they were fighters. They had been made to endure, and now, with him, they would redefine their fate. The ship's lights pulsed softly around them, a heartbeat in the ice. Ethan looked at Lyra, her silver eyes glowing in the dim corridor. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we find the truth about those who made you." Lyra nodded, determination in every movement. Outside, the frozen world was calm for a moment, but they knew it would not stay quiet for long. They were no longer hiding. They were ready. The universe had sent hunters, but it had also sent them power. And together, human and hybrid would face what came next. The story was far from over. The final confrontation was approaching, and the Baron were about to rise. The night was darker than ever. The sky a deep violet, streaked with distant stars that seemed to watch them. Ethan stood at the edge of the frozen cliff, his rifle in hand. Lyra beside him, her silver eyes burning with determination. Her sisters flanked them, their hybrid energy glowing faintly beneath the thin human coats. Together, they faced the approaching fleet of human drones, each one humming with deadly precision, scanning for life and signaling danger. Ethan felt the cold wind biting at his face, but it was nothing compared to the fear in his chest. He looked at Lyra, her hand brushing against his. "You ready?" he whispered. She nodded, a small smile forming. "For us, for everyone." The sisters touched the console of the ship again, sending a pulse of energy through the ice. It spread like veins of light, creating barriers and traps in the snow. The drones faltered as their sensors went haywire, blinking and spinning. The battle began in silence at first. Then, chaos erupted. Crystalline beams shot from the ancient ship, cutting through the drones like knives. Ethan fired his rifle, taking down the closest machine. Lyra's sisters coordinated their attacks, their hybrid energy amplified by the ship's AI. The ground shook as the first wave of drones crashed into the ice, frozen in place or destroyed by pulsing energy fields. Ethan moved forward, leading Lyra and the sisters toward the main control of the drones. The AI of the human fleet tried to adapt, but the ship reacted faster, anticipating every movement. Its ancient systems remembered the patterns of life it had protected for centuries. And now, it had them, human and hybrid, working as one. Lyra stepped into the open, her arms raised. Her energy pulsed outward, creating waves that disrupted the drone's circuits. The sisters joined her, their combined force forming a barrier of light around Ethan. He watched, amazed at their power. These women, once considered failures, now radiated strength and purpose. They were alive, more than alive. They were unstoppable. One drone managed to break through the first barrier. It swooped down toward Ethan, spinning blades glowing red. He raised his rifle and fired, the crystalline bullet piercing the drone's core. It exploded in a shower of sparks and ice fragments. Lyra called out to him, guiding the sisters. "Push them back. Don't let them reach us." Together, they moved like a storm, their energy, courage, and determination unstoppable. Hours passed, but the drones kept coming. Ethan began to see the pattern. They were relentless because they had no respect for life. But he and the hybrids fought with everything they had. The ship itself seemed alive, anticipating, protecting, teaching. It moved the ice, redirected the beams, and gave them cover. Every drone destroyed was a statement. The Baron would not be taken again. Finally, the last drone fell, spinning into the ice, broken and silent. Ethan and Lyra breathed heavily, their faces streaked with frost and ash. Her sisters leaned against the ship, exhausted but alive. The AI's hum slowed, almost like a heartbeat. Lyra looked at Ethan, her voice soft. We did it." He nodded, a smile touching his lips. "Together." She turned to her sisters, her silver eyes shining. "We are not mistakes." The eldest sister spoke. "We are survivors, we are fighters, and we are free." Ethan watched them, feeling pride he had not known in years. The Baron, once created to fail, had risen, and humanity, for the first time, would see what it had thrown away. The storm cleared slowly, leaving a sky full of stars. The ice reflected the light like 1,000 mirrors. Ethan looked up, feeling small, but alive. Lyra placed her hand on his shoulder. "You believed in us," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, we believed in each other." The ancient ship hummed softly, its energy wrapping around them. It was alive because they were alive. They had survived the cruelty, the experiments, the storms. And now, they would live on their terms. The Baron had risen. The human and hybrid stood together, unbroken. And in that silent, frozen valley, a new chapter began. No one would ever call them failures again. Their story would travel across galaxies. A tale of hope, courage, and the power of humanity to choose mercy over cruelty. Ethan looked at Lyra, her hair glowing silver under the starlight. And for the first time, he felt truly at home. The storm was gone. The battle was won. And the universe would remember the rise of the Baron.